If I asked you to think of what conspiracy theory art looks like, you probably pictured one of two things. Maybe you thought of some kind of hacky political cartoon type of thing. You know, the stuff where every single thing is labeled so as to destroy any possibility of subtlety. Or perhaps you pictured this sort of hyper-real, nightmarish image full of exaggerated facial expressions and super saturated colors. And for this style, there's largely one man responsible. That man is David Dees. And no, when I told some of my friends that I was working on a video about David Dees, they thought I was trying to trick them and it was gonna be like, Dees nuts, right? But no, David Dees is a real guy. Now, David Dees is a bit of a controversial guy for obvious reasons, but whether or not you agree with his views, there's no denying that there's a level of character and artistry in his work that's exceptionally rare in political satire. So you might not be surprised to hear that he had a long career well before this, working with clients like Hanna-Barbera, Disney, and most notably Sesame Street. So how does a man go from Muppets to mind control? Let's find out in today's episode of Tales from the Internet. This video is sponsored by Helix. Helix makes premium mattresses and bedding, custom fit to your needs, and shipped right to your door. Everyone sleeps differently, so Helix has you take a sleep quiz to match your body type and sleep preferences. I'm a side sleeper, so Helix set me up with a Sunset mattress. This year, Helix launched their newest and most high-end collection yet, the Helix Elite mattress. They put their years of extensive mattress expertise to use to create a truly elevated sleep experience. The Helix Elite collection includes 6 different mattress models to combine high-end luxury with personalized comfort tailored to your preferences. Helix delivers your mattress right to your door with free shipping in the US. It comes rolled up in a box and is easy to set up. And to make sure you love your Helix mattress, there's a 100 nights of sleep trial. You also get a 10-year warranty, as well as financing options and flexible payment plans. And Helix mattresses are fiberglass free. I've been sleeping on Helix mattresses for a couple of years now, and it's some of the best sleep I've ever gotten. I always get comments about how comfortable my mattress is. Just go to helixsleep.com/wang. You'll get 20% off your Helix mattress as well as 2 free pillows. Even if you don't know his name, you've probably seen some of David Dees' art. He's had a lot of things that became memes somewhat recently, like the vaccine checkpoint, and Sheeple magazine definitely made the rounds. And he's also got this piece called Dinner, which, as the representative of the average American, he has none other than Boogie2988. So who is the man behind these pieces? David Eugene Dees was born on July 9th, 1957. He grew up in the city of New Orleans, Louisiana.
My father's a school teacher. He taught college level and high school advanced mathematics.
This instilled a sense of pressure on him to succeed. But thankfully, David surpassed expectations, achieving nearly perfect grades.
I was, ace in mathematics.
It was enough to impress the highly selective Emory University, and upon being accepted, he moved out to Atlanta, Georgia. However, upon arriving, he grew dissatisfied.
So when I got to Emory, I soon realized that I didn't want to be there.
This was all a path that had been chosen for him by his parents.
Look, it's what they wanted.
He came to resent the school system, later concluding that it bred out creativity.
They put you through 12 years of school where they didn't even teach you to be an artist. They didn't want you to be an artist. They don't want you to be creative.
Despite being a school teacher, his father helped inspire his son's love for art. The story begins one fateful afternoon when David was around 5 years old. He recalls walking around town with his father, window shopping, when all of a sudden this painting with a snowy scene caught their attention.
He saw a painting of a snow scene in the window, and he stood there in awe of how beautiful this painting was. And he said, I'm going to come back tomorrow and see how much that is, because I love that painting.
It was out of their range, so instead he decided to paint his own. David watched this process the whole way through, and in doing so, learned how to draw.
He stood there with a piece of paper, watched him. He sketched that painting that he wanted, and he went back a few times and was checking on colors and stuff, and he went home and painted his own. And what was happening was that he was showing me how to paint. I mean, he was showing me how to research, how to go to books, and everything you needed to paint. This was my education. He
continued to study on his own, practicing landscapes and wildlife. And these early works were informed by methods taught to him by his father. But that changed once he left Emory to pursue art fully.
And I called my father and I said, look, I've decided I'm going to become an artist. And he said, can you make any money doing that? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to try. And he said, okay, we'll back you up.
From his recollection, there were only 2 art colleges nearby.
And when they came in the mail, the first one came in the mail was the Fine Art College. It was pictures of people with big easels and looking very artistic, you know. But then when the second one, the commercial art catalog came, on the cover was a guy sitting at a drawing board with magic markers, and he was illustrating a cheeseburger. And as soon as I saw that, I went, oh, that's it. That's it. Man, I literally was jumping up and down because I like the idea of doing a cheeseburger with magic markers.
David dreamed of becoming an airbrush artist, hoping to one day design custom decals for vans and motorcycles. He said that it was the greatest thing he could imagine. Having a fantastic painting driving around on wheels for all to see. What an audience. He didn't stay in art school long, dropping out to find work. And his break came after literally begging for a position at Graphics Group Incorporated.
In the beginning, I worked in advertising, and I worked as a staff illustrator in a design studio.
That's right.
And there was 8 illustrators and 5 designers, and that's unheard of anymore. But this was back in the 80s when that sort of thing was happening.
But David would later liken this job to a sweatshop. But he worked with them for years creating newspaper and magazine ads. It wasn't until 1984 that he left Graphics Group, driving west to LA to start his own studio. This is when he started Dees Illustrations, a freelance studio that specialized in the entertainment industry. By then, David had a variety of techniques from realism to more wacky cartooning, and this proved quite popular as he painted hundreds of covers, ads, and displays over the next 17 years.
I was doing stuff for Disney and Paramount Home Video. I got the Hanna-Barbera account, Life magazine, Time magazine, billboards. I was doing Coca-Cola.
And in 1996, David began what was a long association over the course of his career. He was hired to work for Sesame Street magazine, with his art appearing nearly every month for 13 years. That included 7 covers and eventually 4 entire books. He once remarked, "I have painted enough fur and feathers to gag a maggot." Over those years, his work had gone digital using Photoshop over liquid acrylic paint. At first, you might assume that this was just due to industry trends, but David had begun to face serious health complications due to his exposure to the paint.
I love that acrylic paint, and I thin it down and airbrush it. And turns out it had cadmium in it, which is a heavy metal just south of mercury and lead in toxicity.
The poisoning completely changed his life, and he retreated to solitude. And it was in this isolation that he familiarized himself with the internet. This quickly turned into obsession as he delved into the world of conspiracy theories.
And at what point in your art career did conspiracy theories come into your life?
It was 9/11. I was looking at a website called Find the Boeing. It had the Pentagon close-up photographs of the hole where the plane went through. Does that really look like a plane could go through this? Up to that point, I kind of went with what I was being told through the media, and it all stopped at that point.
As David puts it, he went down the rabbit hole and needed to expose the global agenda of the Zionists. This would end up destroying his industry career. The following is an excerpt from Gawker's interview with David in 2015. "I was best friends with the editor of Sesame Street magazine for over 10 years. She is a Zionist Jew. I used to ask her what the whole uproar about Jews was because they seemed really nice and intelligent. She would say she did not know. Then when I found out about the massacres of Palestinians and stealing their land in 1948, I confronted her with it. She was not happy. Unemployed and disillusioned with his own country, David fled to Sweden shortly after. He moved in 2003 explaining the government was less hostile towards its people. 3 years later, he created his first political satire.
2006, I did my first political art. It shows how the politicians are getting rich on creating wars.
It was a massive turning point, not just because it dictated the future of his art, but he says that it was also the first time he drew something for himself. Before I woke up to 9/11, my work was 100% commissioned. I never ever did art for my own enjoyment. It was just a job. But now I have a massive audience who are interested in what I have to offer about world events. That is something I never dreamed could happen. Before long, there was an entire section on his site just for politically charged art. It was an endless barrage of aggressive and often disturbing images. He covered nearly every conspiracy you could think of, including chemtrails, Holocaust denial, and the Illuminati. And these were a hit among truthers, quickly circulating all over the internet. And that stature only grew as he provided illustrations for various alt publications. David became so notorious that by 2008, he was covered by the Anti-Defamation League. He was also reported on by the Times of Israel, which he seemed rather proud of.
But it's funny, it's the Times of Israel. They did an article about me, and they called me the notorious David Dees. When you got the Times of Israel Senior Notorious. That's interesting.
It's probably not surprising just from looking at his work why it was so effective. David has an extremely unique photo illustration style. The actual compositions are pretty simple, only consisting of 3 or 4 elements. Each piece begins as a sketch, which he builds upon using thousands of images. They average around 100 to 200 layers each, due to his rudimentary cut and paste style.
Well, you gotta go find the photographs, because I try to do it all photographically. With the internet, I'm able to dial through thousands and thousands of images, which is a dream for anybody that's very visual like me. And it becomes a search for the right photograph at the right angle and the right lighting. It's got to be very simple, you know, so 2 or 3 elements and then dress it up with a few details and you're out.
Where David excelled was his knack for color and his ability to communicate ideas in a quick and humorous way. It was eye-catching and honestly stood on its own, even separate from the message. And this is evident in the fact that his work still found an audience in those who hated his views. An entire subreddit was created called Dees Nuts. It amassed over 15,000 members who derided his work as much as they praised it. Several of his pieces have become memes. His depiction of an MSG meal was plastered across Tumblr. This sheeple cover turned into a popular edit of Joshua the puppy. And most widespread was probably the effects of cell phone towers, which continues to spawn memes to this day. There was enough interest for David to publish a 4-volume coffee table set of his art in 2016, and a lot of its success can be attributed to people who bought it ironically. But in spite of his success, there was no peace for the artist as he continued to grapple with mental illness. Volume 2 even contains a letter that explains the bizarre set of circumstances that brought him back to the US. Over the years, I illustrated topics that the Zionist controllers deem off limits. And in 2010, I was targeted. Exposing this forbidden subject had a price for me too, being gang stalked. My front door opened repeatedly. I changed the lock and it was opened again. I would find where they entered my home and vandalized things. During that time, I had a series of missing time incidents, some for many hours. I believed that I was implanted with nanotechnology. It felt active like a mild electrical sensation. I was kicked out of Sweden in 2012, and while going through the airport, it suddenly began a massive red swelling infection that started from the very point that spot tingled. Within hours, it covered my face. By the time I got antibiotics, it was very serious. Was it an implant triggered to deliver toxins? I don't know. Psychological operations, or a psyop, wrecks your life. I moved back to the US in 2012, and when I put together my first art book, I decided to not add the Holocaust info. Haha. David moved to Ashland, Oregon, where he bought a half-acre of land. He lived alone aside from his string of cats and 17 bunnies. And he got acquainted with the community, illustrating for a variety of local businesses.
I just got hired to do 10 covers for martial arts manuals, and I did the first 3, and he was really happy with them. I do a lot of health book covers. I do history book covers, financial themes, everything. I mean, I've got a little bit of everything in there.
In his spare time, he learned how to sing and began to perform at old folks' homes. He was eventually invited to sing in a hospice, which would become a regular occurrence.
I sang in a hospice room to room. That's how it started. I get invited into a very personal experience where the whole family was around the bed as they died, and then I would sing. Yeah, it was real intense, because I wanted to be as close to the point, you know, when the heavens opened up, you know, and I could somehow experience it.
David found peace in those later years through meditation. He reflected that he'd become more comfortable in his own body. Tragically, it was also around this time that David's father passed away. It was so devastating that David would turn to spirituality to try and feel his presence. One such moment is captured in Brad Abraham's Do You See What I See?, which I've shown excerpts of throughout this video. The following occurs after he recounts the story of his father teaching him how to paint.
I'm just getting intense because I can feel, you know, everybody's here with me, right?
Sure, yeah.
All my relatives are here with me, yeah. Oh, they love this. They love this. So,
especially talking about.
Well, I'm talking about my father too. My father's here. Everybody's here.
And we can.
Oh, I can. Okay, but I mean, I can just feel it. I mean, it's not that I'm sad when I cry. It's just so intense.
Yeah.
And although this documentary is largely a sympathetic portrait of David, Brad does push back on some of David's most controversial views.
9:40 a.m. Reports of gunfire at Sandy Hook Elementary.
And you don't believe that even one child died in the massacre?
Yeah, nobody died. I don't think anybody died. That wasn't even a real school.
But promoting this view devastates parents who have lost their children.
Well, I don't put any photographs of them up. I just suggest that it was fake. It's just a cartoon. If anybody gets upset, hey man, it's my opinion. I can't have an opinion? What, now you're upset? I have to, okay. So I'm terribly insensitive in that way. So I stand by the art.
That includes asking him about his thoughts on Zionism, to which he clarifies that he's not anti-Semitic.
When I look through your work, there's a motif that repeats throughout, and that's the Star of David and the word Zionism.
Yeah, I don't use it anymore.
Not anymore, but it's still out there.
Yeah, I put it on everything.
You can understand then why people might think you're...
anti-Semitic. My Jewish friends were the smartest, most fun people to be around. That's why they were friends of mine.
I'm Jewish. Does that change how you feel about me?
No, I think you're cool. Look, I have Jewish friends. I mean, it's not like I turn it, but I never considered myself an extremist. I like everybody now. I've changed my mind on everything. I won't put my attention on things that upset me anymore.
The documentary was shot in February of 2020. A month before David was diagnosed with cancer. He passed away on May 31st of 2020 in one of the very hospices he performed at. He was 62 years old. Brad's documentary released a year later, where it got Vimeo staff pick and was featured on Short of the Week. It's very well done, so I highly recommend watching it for a more personal profile of David Dees. But anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, turn on notifications and check out my video about the funeral home that sold human body parts. I'm out.